Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, welcome, welcome. It is Tuesday. It is 4 p.m. ET, and we are so thrilled that you have found us here on Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze. I'm your host, Hank Phillippi Ryan, the USA Today bestselling author of 15 going on 16 novels of suspense. My current novel is One Wrong Word, which you can see casually on the door behind me. My new book comes out in September. It's called All This Could Be Yours, about a debut author on a book tour who realizes she has a stalker, and she thinks it might be her fault that a Faustian bargain she once made is about to come due. So that comes out September the 9th. So watch for it, because we're not talking about it today. Today we are talking about the seductive, gorgeous, sinister, thank you, Katy Hays, Saltwater by Katy Hays, which you will just love. It's out right now from Valentine Books, and it is sultry and gorgeous, and as I said, sinister and supremely surprising. I mean, gasp-worthy surprising. And I want to talk to you all about this today with our wonderful author, Katy Hays, who is now in California. Welcome, 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 Katy. Thank you for being back here.
Thank you so much for having me, Hank.
It's so interesting. I last night I watched the end of White Lotus. Did you watch
right.
it? And it just reminds me of this so much, that same sultry, sunny, rich people behaving badly kind of thing. Is that top of mind to you at all, the sort of rich people behaving badly and why we're so drawn to that?
Yeah, it's funny. I love The White Lotus so much. And I think this novel in particular shares a lot of the same DNA as the second season of White Lotus. So if you enjoyed that, I think that's a really great touchstone for this book. I also think that we're so fascinated with money in general. Historically, novelists have always been interested in money. But I think we are in a moment where it has particular resonance within the culture. And I think that we're all really interested in the power dynamics around it right now.
All of those things are things I want to talk about when I talk to you more. If you're just arriving, hey, Kathy Lanigan, and hey, Renee Herskowitz and Christy H. from Southern California. Love it. Susie Baldwin is here, and Robin Stahl, and Renee and Shannon Hansen says eager to hear and read about the book. No, you said eager to hear about and read the book. Whatever you said, Shanson, that's what I'm going to say. I agree. We're talking with Katy Hays today about Saltwater, about money and power and envy and manipulation, and just unbelievably cinematic setting. So welcome, welcome, welcome to Crime Time. Crime Time is a part of A Mighty Blaze, which was started at the beginning of the pandemic by the powerhouse duo of Caroline Levitt and Jenna Blum to keep us discovering new books and being together in our reading and writing community, and maybe finding a new favorite book, and that just might be Saltwater, which we are talking about today. Two more things very, very quickly. Katy Hays is giving away a copy of Saltwater to one lucky commenter. Denise says it's on my TBR list, and Julie Brinkley says, hi, Hank and Katy, and Kathy Lanigan says, I love The White Lotus, especially the first two seasons. Julie Brinkley says, I am 2 chapters in, but I had to put it down to see this. Julie, we will not give anything away. Let me quickly tell you about Katy Hays so you know who she is. Katy Hays is a writer and adjunct art history professor in California, where she teaches rural students from Truckee to Tecopa. She holds an MA in art history from Williams College and pursued her PhD at UC Berkeley. Having previously worked at major art institutions, including the Clark Art Institute and SF MoMA, she now lives with her husband and dog, Queso, if that is the cutest name, in Olympic Valley, California. The CLOISTERS, you remember the CLOISTERS. Katy was on here on Crime Time talking about the fabulous CLOISTERS. Don't miss that too. It's a standalone, so you can read both of them. This is her second novel, Saltwater. Let me show you it one more time. And there are some similarities and there are some big differences. So Katy, your turn now. Tell us all about the book.
Yeah, so Saltwater is the story of a family who has everything and the women who will stop at nothing to escape them. And it is a novel about a family who for 30 years has gone on the same vacation to the island of Capri, where they have stayed at the same villa after a death in the family occurred, and they have been living under a cloud of suspicion about this death. And in that sense, I think it's very reminiscent. I was asked recently if it had any kind of like true crime touchstones. And I do think when I was asked this question, I think it actually shares a lot with Natalie Wood's death, because of course, after Natalie Wood died, her husband has lived with this kind of suspicion over him for the last, however many years since she died. And this family is experiencing the same thing. And then when they return to the island for their annual family vacation, it happens again, and another woman in their orbit is found dead below the cliffs of Capri. And under this renewed scrutiny, the family fractures. And so the novel kind of follows that disintegration after this second murder.
I mean, it's so powerful, the court of public opinion, no
Mhm.
matter what a court of law says, or no matter what might really happen, that the community, whether it's a tight community like on the Isle of Capri, or whether it's a bigger organization or population, we believe what we want to believe, and that affects how the family is treated and how they're dealt with. There's a marvelous scene in a restaurant where someone says something to someone sort of behind the scenes, and you get this facade. The main characters, Helen, the rich daughter, and also Lorna, sort of the fish out of water character. Can you tell us a little bit about each of those people?
Yeah, so they are the two kind of anchor point of view characters in the novel. And Lorna is coming into this family as someone who works for one of the patriarchs of the family. She's a sort of a dog's body assistant. She does a little bit of everything. And she is very familiar with people like the Lingates. She's been around a lot of affluent, rich individuals in her life. And she is looking for a way to escape and get some leverage. And the daughter, Helen, is actually looking for simultaneously the same thing. She's looking to build some distance between herself and her family. And she and Lorna kind of meet, become friendly, and realize that they're after the same goal and that perhaps they can help one another. And I really enjoyed writing the novel from these two perspectives, and also from the perspective of the woman who died 30 years ago, Helen's mother, Sarah, because I think a lot of times when we think about kind of affluent families like this, families who have sort of storied wealth, it's in a really patriarchal lens. We think about the prodigal son, we think about the way men carry on the family legacy. And this novel is very much instead about the women that remake the family and kind of their power struggle within it.
That is so brilliant, the women that remake the family. And I never thought about that before you just said that, how those all the kinds of succession stories are about men and who will replace men. And so men oriented. And the men characters in this novel, we're talking about Saltwater by Katy Hays, are definitely damaged throughout. And it's the women who have the power, whether it's very obvious or whether it's very secret. You do such a good job with that. Tell me about the Lingates a little bit.
Yeah, the Lingate family is a storied, kind of historic old money family from the West Coast, from California. They made their fortune in oil, but diversified it later into a large holding corporation. And they are, based in so many ways on families like the Dohenis and the Gettys, these kind of big, what passes for old money in California, but not obviously in a place like New York or Boston. But I'm really interested also in the way wealth is stratified even among the highest echelons. So there are other characters in the novel who are even more privileged than the Lingates, or who are similarly privileged, but perhaps a little bit less so, because I think even when you have a lot of money, there is this constant jockeying for position. And so this is a family that is acutely aware of the fact that their fortunes, however great they may be, have since been eclipsed by some of these big sort of tech oligarchical figures that have emerged in the latter half of the 20th century and early 21st century.
And the tragedy of what happened earlier has so tarnished this family that almost they can't recover from that. We were talking earlier about the court of public opinion. How powerful do you think that is, the idea that there's something iffy in a family's past, and how that can paint them with that through no matter what happens?
I mean, I think we see that all the time, actually, kind of in the contemporary world, particularly in a world where, gossip is easily accessible. It's digital now. It transmits very quickly. And I think that, a very big event, a death like this, a very suspicious, very public death of a wife, which is what happens in the novel, can forever kind of tarnish a family's legacy or make it just leave a black mark, leave something really difficult for them to deal with constantly.
Yes, and you handle it so gorgeously. We're talking about Saltwater, a seductive, mysterious, manipulative book of gaslighting and gorgeous, gorgeous scenery. It has this echo of Rebecca a little bit in the novel, that sort of what happens in the past colors what happens in the present and in the future. The book is just, in all of the reviews, the same word gets used over and over and over, the same two words, sultry and seductive. And that has so much to do with your gorgeous cinematic setting. Can you tell us a little bit about it and how you know so much about it?
Yeah. The book is set on the island of Capri, and I think I always knew that the book would be set there for a couple of reasons. One, I was really interested in the island's literary history. Some of my favorite writers have spent a lot of time there, Graham Greene and Shirley Hazard, who were there kind of in the middle of the 20th century. And I have been a big fan of the kind of claustrophobic environment that an island like this can provide for a novel. And when I was writing the book, my husband and I went to the island to visit. It was my first time ever being there. I had already begun on the book when I started, or I'd already begun on the book when we visited. And I found that the island itself provided in every way for the narrative, right? The setting provided for the narrative. It offered me so many options for scene work. It offered me so many wonderful places, the actual atmosphere, the environment, the humidity, the kind of the superficiality. And I mean that in the way that the island is very much about surface. It's very much about performances and performances of money and kind of, performances of who you know and where you're going and what restaurant you're eating at. And I found that all so fascinating as someone who was there specifically to research a novel that's built around obviously dead bodies and suspense and all of that.
Absolutely so. And let me remind you that Katy is giving away a copy of Saltwater to one lucky commenter. Not this copy, I'm keeping this one. But do leave a question, do leave a comment for Katy, and we'll spin the wheel of fun at the end of the show and see who wins. Betty Fellows is here, and Katie Crutchfield-Wassland is here, and Deborah Press. So nice to see you all, Julie Brinkley. I want to know, I wonder what it was like going to the Isle of Capri, knowing that you were going to write a book about it. And so your brain couldn't relax and be there as much as it might have been, because you were always thinking, figs, I can use that. Lemon, I can use that. Humidity, I can use that. There's no beach, I can use that. Talk a little bit about the writer brain versus the tourist brain.
It's funny. I live in the mountains of California, and I am very much, I believe someone said to me once that there's two types of vacation people. You're either a beach person or you're a mountain person. And I am 100% a mountain person. I'm not a beach person. I don't even really like going to the beach for more than 24 hours. So for me, visiting Capri was very much a research trip. I would never have probably chosen on my own to go there. In fact, we had been on vacation. We were on vacation in northern Italy in the mountains, hiking and skiing and kind of doing mountain activities when I decided that we needed to drive, 9 hours south to Capri for a research trip. So I think I always came to the island with this idea that I was there to research for the novel. And that was something that I felt very passionate about. I mean, I think for me as a writer, setting is as much a character as any of the actual human characters in the novel. And so I knew coming in, I just really wanted to focus on what the island was like. And for me, as a writer, kind of practice wise, I do that by writing every day in the morning about what I experienced the day before. I take notes on my phone. I walk around. I spend a lot of time just walking around and thinking. And it was kind of funny because, of course, Capri at the time was in the middle of this huge heat wave. So you really couldn't go do anything all day long. I mean, it was so brutally hot, and you could only go out in the evenings. And so you would kind of go out at 5 o'clock, and then the town would explode after like 1 a.m. And it was wild to experience. It was great fun.
And that's you can't get that from Google Earth. You just can't. The
No.
book is so full of the senses, the scent of lemon and the scent of fig and the scent of pine. And that's, you must have, it comes through so beautifully how you must have experienced that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, all of that is true to life, 100%.
And the food. I mean, somebody has to do the research about the food, the description of the food, and the sort of, not only the food, but the sort of attitude about the food. Like, yes, this is gorgeous. Yes, this is voluptuous. Yes, this is delicious. And it's so boring. We have this all the time. Talk a little bit about that attitude throughout. I think that's one of the things that's so genius about this book, how you channel that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think that you become accustomed to whatever is in front of you at all times. And so when what's in front of you all the time is really excellent cuisine, you become very used to it. And I think this is very much, it's funny, we often use the phrase rich people behaving badly for thrillers as kind of a shorthand. But I think this is so much a book about what rich people are willing to do to protect that very fragile world they live in. And I think in the world of saltwater, none of this is guaranteed. It feels like it is, but this is a family that is constantly aware that it might be pulled back. And they are surrounded by people who are also aware that it might be pulled back. And so despite this kind of blasé attitude they have to this luxurious life they're living, there is a drumbeat of anxiety that is brought on by, being faced with people who have more money, that by being faced with kind of risks to their reputation. And so I think it's an interesting performance, really, this blasé attitude they have.
And you captured it so beautifully, because there is this undercurrent of that it's all built on such a rickety foundation, and that there are people who are out to harm them. And that suspense and that tautness is surrounded by this sultriness, which I think must have been such a juggle to write. I mean, how did you keep this book being, I don't know how even you're going to describe this, but the book is such a page turner, and yet you can feel the weight of the heat and the pressure and the mind games in it. How did you deal with that?
It's funny. I always write by feel. So for me, it's really just about finding a good balance in the revision. And I think for me, I really just kind of, I feel like the atmosphere is so much a part of it that I don't think it weighs it down. And I just, I kind of even it out as you revise. I mean, that's just the practice of revising a novel.
I mean, it actually propels it for me in the book. When they go to a place where you can't get there without a boat, and then a boat comes, and you realize that something has happened that the main characters, one of the main characters doesn't know. The isolation and the knowledge and what's happening in the background, and a very subtle but thought-provoking examination of the class system that exists. Can you talk a bit about that and why that's important?
Yeah, I think as I said earlier, I think in these sort of upper echelons, when you have so much money, you can still kind of parse who has more than you. And I do think there is an intense fixation on that. And I think it feeds a lot of class anxiety and a lot of kind of power dynamics. And so I was really interested rather in setting up a kind of stratification among, rich people are all one group, but then within that, there are kind of even further delineations. And so that was what I was really, after in Saltwater.
But also outside of that class, the workers and the helpers and the help and the staff and the waiters and the maids and the housekeepers and the sailors and the people who are just used by these people as if they are just machinery, essentially, and how they deal with the people with all the wealth. It was so well done, Katy.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that in this book, in fact, all of those workers, everyone within the orbit of the family in this particular group, they're actually the ones with more power because they have more information. And so the family is in many ways kind of at the mercy of those around them, because the staff who work for them, the girls in their orbit, they're the ones who know the secrets. And so despite the NDAs, it's in fact that group that, you know, has the most power, has the most leverage, and ultimately, you know, will kind of exact their revenge.
And that's so, you know, we see it in the book, this inexorable situation that it was supremely surprising. Let me just say that, and I won't go any farther, but I always know what's going to happen in a book. And I did not know. You completely got me with this. So that, you know, the kind of thing that makes me gasp is great. There are elements also of sort of, Patricia Highsmith in this book, that people are sometimes pretending to be who they're not. Was that something that you did consciously, or did it just sort of come out that way? Is she one of your favorites, or did people tell you that later?
You know, I'm a big Patricia Highsmith fan. I've read almost all of her books. I've even read her journals and her diaries and her letters. I really love her work, and I'm really fascinated by it. And I do think there's certainly, you know, someone described it to me as an Italian noir the other day, and I do think it does have the elements kind of a noir. But I think, you know, the book, at the foundation of the book, is this play that the dead wife, Sarah Lingate, has written. And I think so much of the novel is also about performances and how we perform for those around us. And I think that that's something that Patricia Highsmith's Ripley really embodies, but it's something that I was also just interested in exploring because, you know, the island is so much about those performances as well, that I wanted to think about this in terms of kind of theater almost. And so that's really a big part of the foundation of the book.
Oh, that is a really cool way of thinking about it as theater. That's sort of changed the prism in my head quite a bit about the book. That's wonderful. What a brilliant thing. Can you talk a little? Oh, who's that, Katie?
That's our dog. Sorry.
That's queso barking, right? I love it. We welcome pets here at Crime Time. We welcome pets. So you were talking about Sarah Lingate's play. Talk a little bit about the structure of the book, how it's organized and arranged, and how you manage to, it's very carefully structured and very seamless at the same time. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you did that?
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, the book is multi-POV, three timelines, multiple points of view, and it is interwoven and alternating throughout, and it's divided into two parts. And so the book itself, the structure was quite a lot to wrangle, but I feel very happy with how it came together in the end. And it is told from the point of view of Lorna and Helen. And I don't want to give too much of the novel away by saying the context around it, but basically Lorna is missing and Helen is investigating her death, and we get both of them from the past and the present, and it's interspersed with chapters from Sarah Lingate, the playwright, as well.
And you very clearly label the chapters, so there is never a moment in the reader's mind of wondering where are we and when are we. It's supremely clear. What's also a juggle for a writer in conveying a story to a reader is that we are wary of every single one of these characters. And we know that many of them are telling us only one, you know, as you said, the performance. They're only giving us the performance. And it's up to the reader to figure out what's underneath those performances and where their lines are coming from. People always talk about, oh, I didn't like the main character. She's not likable. And we relate to these characters on some level fully throughout. Where are you on the likable, relatable, compelling, interesting, intriguing spectrum of how characters should be?
It's funny when readers say a character is unlikable, I usually ignore that as feedback because my feeling is I don't care if a character is unlikable. I care if a character is interesting. But when a reader says, for example, the pacing is slow or this didn't work, if they're talking about something else in the novel, I'm always interested to hear that because I do think that that's really interesting and valuable feedback for a writer. As far as character unlikability goes, I'm here for all your unlikable characters. I'm never the kind of reader who needs, a lot of time readers will say, I need someone to root for. I don't need someone to root for. I just want your characters to be interesting.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I care about. So that's my perspective on unlikable characters.
I agree with you so thoroughly about that. And I think the key of that is that, and you're great at this. We're talking about the book Saltwater by Katy Hays, which is just out from Ballantine Books. What you're so good at is letting us know, or at least have a window into why someone would do what they do, why someone would make the decisions that they make. And that allows the reader to say, well, I'm not sure I would have done that, but I see why she did. I see why that's important. The motivation of a character. Do you think about that often?
I do. I think every reader has to.
Yes, and once you get that, then it's not a question of likable. We all think of what we might do if the situation forces us to do something. We might do something that we never thought we would do. And isn't that what makes a good story? That something happens and someone has to do something as a result of that.
Yeah, I think that is what makes a great story, honestly.
Speaking of what makes a great story, and we're not going to give away anything, you all, especially the person who's reading chapter 2 and came back to hear about this. Did you know the ending, and you know what I mean by the ending, and write to it, or did it appear to you at some point?
It's funny. When I started this book, I couldn't initially make it work. I wrote it for almost a year and set it aside, and then wrote an entirely different book, which I ended up putting in the drawer and will not go back to in all likelihood. And I came back to Saltwater and I finally figured out how to make the ending work. I always knew I wanted to get to the ending. But even as I was writing it, I didn't know how I would get there or how I would make it work. And so there were several iterations of this book where the ending was not what it is today. And I kept revising it and redrafting and trying to get there. And I finally figured out how to make it work. So no, I mean, often I will hope that I know where I'm going, but mostly I write just praying that I get there.
I'm just, this is good. Maybe this will work. I mean, I'm working on my new book now, and I'm really far into it, like 103,000 words. And someone said, "Great, you're done." And I said, "Yeah, well, pretty soon I'm going to find out what happens.
Yeah.
Then I'll go back and take some of it out."
Yeah.
I just am working to get to see what the ending will be. As a writer, what do you think about that? Trusting that your process will eventually get you the story that you hope it would be.
I think you have to. I mean, I'm not an outliner personally. I saw someone asked in the comments if I'm a pantser or a plotter, and I am 100% a pantser, even though I hate that word. But I just I can never outline. I am always just writing and jumping into the void and hoping the story catches me. And you know what, Hank, sometimes it hasn't. I have put books in the drawer that I have not been able to work through, but most of the time, 80% of the time, the story catches you.
I have never heard that expression before, jump into the void and hope the story catches you. That is so perfectly said and so visual. I do it just the same way. You crime timers will know, and you've heard me say this, that I have no idea what's going to happen next. And that my editor has said to me, I think 15 times, can't you just send me an outline? And I said, I wouldn't know how to do that.
Yeah.
And how do I know what happens until it happens? Do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah. No, I mean, my editor always asks for synopses before I start on a novel. And I can never give her a synopsis. I just give her a pitch of what I think is going to happen. And then I hope, and sometimes the book's totally different.
They forget, they won't remember. One of the things that, and then we'll get to your questions, because I see there are several questions, and that is fantastic. The pronunciation of Capri, we say Capri, but you have someone in the book say it's Capri.
Capri, yes.
Is that the Italian pronunciation?
Yes, it is.
And it was just because of the Frank Sinatra song or whoever sang it that we decided it was Capri.
I mean, it's funny. I think you do sound a bit sort of stuck up if you say Capri, but that is the correct pronunciation. I have no idea where Capri came from, the Americanization of it, but maybe from the Frank Sinatra song.
Maybe so. I've been humming it all day. Sadly, you've put it in my head from this wonderful book. How do you want, and then we'll get to questions. When people close this book, how do you hope they feel? And how did you feel? Let me put it this way as well. How did you feel when you realized, I got this and this is going to work?
When people finish Saltwater, I really hope they feel like these women in the novel have come into their own. I mean, it is very much a book about three women discovering the lengths they're willing to go to survive in this world. And each of them has a different answer. And I hope that readers end up feeling a lot of faith and enthusiasm for the three women in this book.
It's interesting that you say faith and enthusiasm, because there's also a poignancy about the realization of friendship and the realization of women who take power, how they can get it in a way that's very, very surprising.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, I think also it's very much a book about Helen in particular discovering what she's made of and whether or not she is in fact really a Lingate, really a member of her family or not. And I think the answer surprises her and will hopefully surprise readers.
It definitely will. It's terrific. It is a perfect, sultry, seductive, surprising book that will just lure you into its net. And it's absolutely captivating. Congratulations on this.
Thank you so much, Hank.
Oh, my pleasure. What a job, to get to read a good book and then talk to the author about it. Somebody has to do it. Let's take some questions, Margaret, in the back room. Was Saltwater, Shanson says, was Saltwater always the title? She says, love it. I do too. Talk a little bit about the title.
No, the title actually originally was The Vipers, which I have right next to me, which is the UK edition of the novel. So the UK edition of the book has the original title. My US publisher felt that it leaned to sci-fi fantasy for the genre. And so we chose instead to go with Saltwater for the US publication. But I actually really love Saltwater as a title.
I do too, but why?
Why do I love Saltwater as a title? I like it because I think, saltwater is as a substance both healing and corrosive. And I think that families are very much the same way.
That's great. That's such a great explanation. Hold up the Vipers again. That's so interesting.
Yeah, here are both of them. Hold them.
Different book we would expect, wouldn't we, from either of them, those titles?
Sorry, it's reversed, but yeah, that's the cover. It's got like a nice foil on it too. I think in the UK, they also liked it because, of course, my first book is The Cloisters, and they felt that the Vipers sat next to it in a really appropriate way.
That's what I was just going to say. It's really reminiscent of the style and the look of that
it is.
Of The Cloisters, which was one of my favorite books of the year. I love that book. Who else has a question, Margaret? Did you do a lot of people watching when you were on Capri? Did you do a lot of people watching?
Oh my gosh, Julie, nonstop. It was like my favorite sport on the entire trip. I loved the people watching.
What do people wear?
I mean, everything. I mean, everybody's like dressed head to toe Pucci, swanning around in Chanel caftans. It's incredible.
There's a moment in your story where one of the characters sees two beautiful people walking down the street, maybe 3. And she believes that they're real people. And she's told, I mean, apropos of your performance and facade theme, that they're models and that they are hired to walk around to look like that. Is that true, or did you just make up?
No, that happened while we were there. Yeah.
Because, and what a thematic thing to see, right?
Yeah, it was incredible. It was the whole book encapsulated in one moment.
Exactly. So I love that. One more question, maybe two, Mark. Were you oh, hi, Denise. Nice to see you. Were you a writer and reader as a child? Asks Denise.
You know, I was very much a reader as a child, and I didn't really start writing until I was in college.
What was your first thing that you ever wrote? Do you remember?
Oh my gosh. I think I attempted to write, I'm a big romance novel reader and a big fan in particular of Victoria Holt, which is like a very deep cut if you know Victoria Holt novels. And I think I tried to write like a gothic romance when I was probably a sophomore in college and did not ever finish the novel.
What's the Victoria Holt that's set? Isn't there one that's set on a Caribbean island?
There's so many of them. I mean, I have one right here. Yeah, it might even be this one. I have a copy of The Captive, which is like an old, this is a mass market paperback from the 80s. Yeah, I love Victoria Holt, honestly.
Well, what a wonderful inspiration. One more question, Margaret. Let's do one more because I know people have questions. Margaret says, we know Victoria Holt. Katie says, are you currently working on another book?
I am. I just turned a book into my editor 2 weeks before Saltwater published. I do not recommend turning in a book right before a book publishes, but that's what I did. And it is the story of a couple who has recently lost a child, and they move to a small village in Northern California on the coast in the hopes that the village will help heal the wife because she is experiencing a delusion that their child is still alive. But the town has other plans for the couple.
Now it sounds like you're channeling Shirley Jackson a little bit.
It's very much like a folk horror novel, I think. Yeah.
That's what it sounds like. I can't wait to read it. I hope you will come back and tell us all about it next year or whenever it comes out. Renee is loving that idea. Saltwater is the title of the novel by Katy Hays. It's seductive, it's sultry, it's set on the Isle of Capri. Cannot do better than that. Get some Prosecco and pull up a chair and read a little bit of Saltwater. You will love it, but be very careful who you talk to. Let's spin the wheel of fun. Let's spin the wheel of fun and see who's going to win a copy of Saltwater. And look at all the people who are here. This is so great. So I didn't see some of you. Fantastic. Hey, Wahida and Christy and Katie and Sherry and Shannon. And the winner is Lori Seidman Oberman. So nice to see you, Lori, and glad that you are here today. Congratulations on winning. You just send me an email. You'll get some info about how to do that. And then we will send that to Katie's publicist and she will get you your copy of the book. Like you, the rest of you, you know what to do. Run, 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 click, click, click. Get your own copy of Saltwater by Katy Hays. It is really fun to read and incredibly surprising. And you will learn all about the Isle of Capri as well. And now I want to go, but I'm going to be very careful when I do. Before I let you go, let me remind you that next week, we're double booked. And this is the only place, Crime Time, that it's good to be double booked. Next week at 3 p.m. ET, we're going to talk to Aisha Saeed about The Matchmaker. You can see the heart is actually a target, like a gun target. So that is probably, it is a romance and a thriller at the same time. Aisha Saeed's The Matchmaker at 3. And then at 4 p.m. ET, we will talk to Ashley Winstead, whose new book, This Book Will Bury Me, which the title enough doesn't scare you. The book will as well. And Ashley is marvelous. So 2 wonderful authors next week at 3 p.m. and 4 p.m. ET right here on Crime Time today. We have been talking to the marvelous Katy Hays, whose new book, Saltwater, is just, we have engaged her to come back for her new book next year. So that will be great. But meanwhile, run, 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 click, 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 get your copy of Saltwater. Katy, congratulations on this.
Thank you so much, Hank. And I'm so excited for your interviews next week. I love both of those books.
Oh, have you read them? That's great.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you'll come cheer us on. But you'll probably be on book tour, so you get a pass if you're out. If you're out selling your own book, you're very generous. You all, thank you for coming to see us today and hearing about Saltwater by Katy Hays. It's so wonderful to see you all, Susie and Sylvia and Julie and Robin and Chanson and Christy. It is lovely to see you here. I just rely on it, and it makes me so happy that we can share these books with you. So thank you. And we will see you next week at 3 p.m. and at 4 p.m. And until then, have a wonderful life. And we will see you next week at this time. Talk to you soon.